In the 7th century, a sudden and massive military expansion swept across the harsh desert sands and swallowed the ancient world. This map tracks the outward explosion of the Arab Caliphate. In just 4 years, they captured Damascus. In 3, they consumed Egypt and the sprawling city of Alexandria. They marched into Persia, a 400-year-old superpower, and dismantled its power in 18 years. But their peak velocity occurred in July of 711. A general named Tariq crossed the Strait of Gibraltar into Spain with 7,000 men. The Spanish king met him with a full royal army, and by the end of a single afternoon, the king was dead and his forces were routed. The caliphate operated as a highly efficient military machine, capable of erasing thousands of years of established civilization in a matter of months. Yet directly to the east, that momentum hit a geographic and military wall. This is the Indus River. For the extending empire, the Makran coast and the banks of this water became a permanent, immovable border. The same armies that conquered Spain in an afternoon spent 75 years failing to push past this point. They launched naval raids and land invasions starting in 636, but for nearly 8 decades, they failed to breach a single Indian fortress. The repeated defeats became so severe that Caliph Umar, the exact leader who freely rewarded his commanders for taking the Middle East, issued a strict warning. He threatened to wipe out the entire family of his own governor if even one more soldier was killed trying to cross into India. The caliph's informants had made the reality clear. The rulers in the subcontinent maintained fiercely guarded, long-range supply chains and engaged in combat tactics the invaders had never countered. The Indian border became a graveyard for Arab commanders. The most aggressive war machine on the planet had finally struck a civilization they were unable to break through. That 75-year stalemate only ended because a new governor in Iraq, Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, became obsessed with taking the Sindh province. He realized that conventional cavalry charges were failing against Indian defenses. He handed command to a 17-year-old named Muhammad bin Qasim, giving him 5 colossal sea-transported catapults. One of these siege engines was so large it was called the Bride, requiring 500 soldiers just to operate it. They could now crush fortresses from a distance without sending troops to the gates. When the forces finally clashed on the ground, the battlefield devolved into chaos. The Arab forces rode some of the best war horses in the world, but those animals had never encountered Indian elephants. Faced with the sight and smell of these beasts, the cavalry horses panicked, rearing up and refusing to charge. But the volume of long-range siege fire eventually took its toll. King Dahir of Sindh fought on horseback until a flaming projectile struck his ranks, and he was ultimately killed by an arrow to the chest. With the king dead, his queen chose the path of jauhar, ritual self-immolation, rather than surrender. The barrier finally fractured, not due to superior courage, but through a massive escalation in heavy siege technology. Yet the caliphate's victory in India lasted exactly 3 years. Following a regime change back in the Middle East, Qasim was recalled to Iraq and executed over a political grudge. The moment he was removed, the entire bureaucratic and military structure he built in Sindh collapsed. King Dahir's son immediately reclaims the land, forcing the remaining Arab governors to flee. Decades later, a newly appointed governor named Junaid attempted to finish what Qasim started. He pushed his armies deep into Gujarat, Ujjain, and Rajasthan. But by pushing so far inland, he triggered a fatal consequence. The disparate kingdoms of the subcontinent stopped fighting as isolated targets. They formed a massive, unified front. In the north, the Pratihara Emperor Nagabhata I met the Arab armies and shattered their supply lines. Simultaneously, in the south, the Chalukya commander Pulakeshin intercepted the invading forces near Navsari and annihilated them. The caliphate's deepest military incursion backfired. It awakened a multi-front military coalition that permanently broke the Arab invasion force. This map shows the direct result of that Indian victory. The Pratihara Empire established a defensive line stretching all the way to Bengal. This unified bloc acted as a physical wall, squeezing the remaining caliphate presence into 2 shrinking isolated towns near the border. We know how effective this wall was because the enemy documented it. In the 9th century, an Arab merchant named Suleiman recorded his findings. He explicitly wrote the Indian emperor possessed an unmatched cavalry force. the greatest enemy to the expansion of their empire. For 3 centuries, the most aggressive empire on Earth was kept strictly at bay. When the Indian subcontinent eventually fell, it was not to the Arab Caliphate. It fell hundreds of years later to entirely different forces, nomadic, horse-mounted Turkish archers from Central Asia, fighting under completely different military doctrines. The record of this 300-year defense isn't a myth. The details of the coalition, the battles, and the victories are carved directly into the stones of Gwalior, left there by the victors